If you were Henry Ford, from farm boy to automotive legend, you stand in a noisy factory where hundreds of machines move together with perfect rhythm. Raw steel becomes rolling wheels. Silence becomes motion. Outside, cars roll down the street by the thousands. And for the first time in history, millions of ordinary people can finally afford one. But none of this should have happened.
Before we begin this journey, if you also enjoy discovering the secrets behind the success of extraordinary people, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a simple action, but it helps this channel reach more people who are striving to achieve greater things in life, just like you. And now, imagine opening your eyes one morning and realizing that you are that person. The journey begins.
You were only a poor farm boy who hated farming. You had no fortune, no famous name, no formal engineering degree. You had dirt under your fingernails and a restless mind that could not stop asking why things worked the way they did. Everyone around you expected you to spend your life behind a plow. Instead, you would help put the entire world on wheels. How does a boy who despises farm labor end up reshaping how humanity moves, works, and lives? The answer begins not in a factory, but in a quiet farmhouse in rural Michigan on a summer day in 1863. You were born on July 30th, near Dearborn, Michigan, into a world governed by seasons and soil. Your father expected you to inherit the farm, to wake before sunrise, to spend your life feeding animals and harvesting crops. And you tried. You truly tried. But every hour spent pulling weeds felt like a small piece of your spirit slipping away. You did not hate work. You hated meaningless, repetitive labor that never seemed to improve. What you loved was different. You loved watches. You would sit for hours with a pocket watch in your palm, prying it open, studying the tiny gears turning inside like a miniature universe. While other boys chased each other through the fields, you crouched in a corner of the barn, a borrowed toolkit spread across a wooden crate, trying to understand why one gear turned faster than another. Neighbors began bringing you their broken clocks and watches, and you fixed them, one by one, often late into the night by candlelight while the rest of the house slept. Your family called it a hobby. Your father worried it distracted you from real work. You knew it was something more. You were not just repairing machines. You were learning how the world truly worked, one gear at a time. Every broken plow, every stalled thresher, every piece of farm equipment that groaned and refused to function became an invitation. While your father saw a problem to be endured, you saw a puzzle to be solved. You began to understand that machines, unlike people, followed rules. If you studied them carefully enough, they would always make sense. That certainty felt like a comfort in a world that often did not. Then, when you were 13, tragedy struck. Your mother passed away, and something inside you changed forever. She had been the emotional center of your family, and her absence left a silence that farm life could never fill. You needed to build something. You needed to create, not just survive. At 16, you made a decision that shocked your father. You walked away from the farm and went to Detroit. Detroit in the 1880s was loud, dirty, and alive with opportunity. Factories belched smoke into the sky. Horse-drawn wagons clattered over cobblestone streets. You arrived with almost nothing, just your hands and your hunger to learn. You took an apprenticeship at a machine shop, earning wages so small they barely covered rent for a cramped boarding room. The hours were brutal, often stretching from before sunrise until long after dark. The work was exhausting, and the older machinists showed little patience for a farm boy who asked too many questions. You slept little and ate less. More than once, lying awake in that narrow rented bed, You questioned whether you had made a terrible mistake leaving home. But every single day, you learned something new. You studied steam engines until you understood every valve and piston by instinct. You moved from shop to shop, absorbing knowledge like a sponge that could never be full, each new position teaching you something the last one could not. When money ran short, you swallowed your pride and returned home for a while, repairing farm equipment to survive, even working for a period installing and servicing steam engines across the Michigan countryside. It was not the glamorous engineering career you dreamed of. It was hard, humbling, uncertain work, the kind that tests whether a dream is real or merely a passing fantasy. Yours never faded. Then, you married Clara Bryant, and everything gained new purpose. You were no longer just building a career for yourself. You were building a future for your family. In 1891, you took a job that would change your life. You became an engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company in Detroit. You worked night shifts, keeping the massive dynamos running so the city could have electric light. It was demanding work, but it gave you something priceless: time. During the day, while others slept, you experimented in a small workshop, sketching designs for a gasoline-powered engine. Your co-workers thought you were obsessed. Maybe you were. But you could not stop imagining a self-propelled carriage that needed no horse. Then came a night that changed everything. At a company convention, you found yourself standing before Thomas Edison, the most famous inventor in America. Nervously, you described your idea, a lightweight engine that could power a vehicle. You expected him to dismiss it. Instead, Edison slammed his hand on the table and told you to keep going. He believed in your vision when almost no one else did. That single moment of encouragement lit a fire inside you that never went out. You began working after midnight in a small brick shed behind your home, stealing hours of sleep to chase your obsession. Clara sewed fabric for the seat covers. You melted, shaped, and assembled engine parts by hand. Money was tight. Doubt crept in more than once. But you kept building. By the spring of 1896, your creation was almost finished. A small vehicle with 4 bicycle-like wheels, a simple gasoline engine, and no reverse gear. You called it the quadricycle. Then, you discovered a humiliating problem. The machine was too wide to fit through the shed door. Without hesitation, you grabbed an axe and knocked down part of the brick wall. Nothing, not even your own workshop, was going to stop you. In the early hours of June 4th, 1896, while most of Detroit slept, you climbed onto the quadricycle and started the engine. It sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. You rode through the empty streets, the machine rattling beneath you, your heart pounding with a mixture of terror and triumph. You had built something that moved on its own power. You had built the beginning of a revolution. But turning an invention into an industry would prove far harder than building it. In 1899, you left Edison Illuminating to start the Detroit Automobile Company, backed by investors eager to profit from your talent. You believed you were finally on your way. Instead, you faced disaster. The vehicles were expensive, unreliable, and slow to produce. Investors grew impatient. Critics mocked your designs. Within 2 years, the company collapsed, and you were left humiliated, watching your name attached to failure. Then came Henry Ford Company, a second attempt with new investors. Once again, conflict emerged. The backers wanted quick profits. You wanted to perfect your engineering, refusing to rush a design you did not believe in yet. Frustrated, you eventually walked away with almost nothing to show for it, and control of the company shifted to men who would later build it into a very different automobile brand. Twice, you had failed to build a lasting company. Twice, newspapers questioned your judgment. Twice, People close to you quietly wondered whether you truly understood business at all, or whether you were simply a talented mechanic chasing an impossible dream. You needed to prove yourself, not just as an inventor, but as a competitor. So, you built racing cars, powerful, dangerous machines designed to win. When your famous racer, known as the 999, roared to victory with a bold young driver behind the wheel, the public took notice. Investors took notice. You had proven that your engineering was not just clever. It was formidable in 1903. With new backing and renewed determination, you founded Ford Motor Company. This time, you were determined to do things differently. Early models like the Model A gave the company its first steady sales, proof that ordinary buyers, not just wealthy hobbyists, wanted automobiles. But you were not satisfied. You were not interested in building cars only for the wealthy. You dreamed of something far bigger, a vehicle so simple and affordable that ordinary farmers, workers, and families could own one. By 1906, the Model N brought you closer. Lighter, cheaper car that outsold nearly everything else on the market. It proved your instinct was right. But you knew you had not built the real breakthrough yet. Something bigger was still waiting. In 1908, that dream became real. You introduced the Model T. It was tough enough to survive rough country roads, simple enough for owners to repair themselves, and priced low enough for everyday Americans to actually afford. At launch, it cost around $850, already far cheaper than most automobiles on the market. For the first time, car ownership was not a luxury reserved for the elite. It was becoming a genuine possibility for the working class. Demand exploded. But building enough Model Ts fast enough became a new challenge entirely in 1913. At your Highland Park plant, you introduced one of the most significant innovations in industrial history, the moving assembly line. Instead of workers gathering around a stationary car, the vehicle now moved past workers, each performing a single, repeated task. What once took over 12 hours to build a single car now took roughly 90 minutes. Efficiency soared. Costs plummeted. Within a few years, the price of the Model T fell to around $300, placing it within reach of millions more families. But faster production created a brutal new problem. The repetitive, exhausting work caused massive employee turnover. Workers quit constantly, unable to endure the monotony. Your solution stunned the entire business world. In January 1914, you announced the $5 workday, more than doubling the average wage for factory workers. Critics called you reckless. Some accused you of destroying capitalism itself. But you understood something deeper. If workers earned more, they could afford to buy the very cars they were building. You were not just creating an industrial process. You were helping to create the modern consumer economy. Ford Motor Company grew into a global empire. Factories rose across the United States, then across Europe, South America, and beyond. You built the massive River Rouge complex, a single site so vast it could take in raw iron ore and glass sand on one end and roll out finished automobiles on the other. Millions of Model Ts filled roads that had once belonged only to horses and wagons. Rural doctors could now reach patients faster. Farmers could carry goods to distant markets. Families could travel farther than their grandparents had ever dreamed possible. Transportation, commerce, and everyday life transformed at a pace the world had never experienced before. And the farm boy who once hated agricultural labor had, without fully intending to, reshaped the very roads that ran past his childhood home. Yet your story is not one of endless triumph. It is also a story of serious flaws. As decades passed, You clung stubbornly to the Model T long after competitors began offering more modern, comfortable vehicles. Sales slipped as rivals like General Motors innovated faster than you were willing to adapt. Inside your own company, you became increasingly controlling, often clashing bitterly with your son Edsel over the direction of the business. Even more troubling, you used your influence and your newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, to spread deeply anti-Semitic writings that caused real and lasting harm. This is not a footnote to be ignored. It is a painful, undeniable part of your legacy, one that historians rightly continue to examine and condemn. Your story cannot be reduced to simple heroism. It is a complicated mixture of visionary achievement and serious moral failure, of generosity toward workers and prejudice toward others, of relentless innovation and stubborn resistance to change. Still, the impact of what you built cannot be denied. You helped transform the automobile from a rich man's novelty into a tool that reshaped how humanity lived, worked, and connected. Assembly line manufacturing, once considered radical, became the backbone of industries far beyond automobiles. The idea that workers should earn enough to become consumers themselves reshaped economic thinking for generations. You never imagined that a farm boy who hated farm work would help put the world on wheels. You never imagined that a broken watch, a candle burning late into the night, and a stubborn refusal to accept failure would eventually connect distant cities, transform economies, and change how billions of people would one day live. History rarely begins with greatness. Sometimes it begins with curiosity. A boy taking apart a pocket watch, wondering how all the small pieces fit together to create something that moved forward, one gear at a time.
Thank you for joining us on today's journey. This story may have come to an end, but the journey of extraordinary people never truly stops. There are still countless lessons, decisions, and moments that changed history waiting to be discovered. The next chapter may arrive sooner than most people expect. If you enjoy exploring the mindset, habits, and secrets behind the world's greatest achievers, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a simple action, but it helps us continue creating inspiring stories for people who are always striving to achieve more in life. And who knows, in the next episode, you may wake up in the life of another legend. We'll see you in the next journey.